Okay, gewaltig. So now I just have to remember where we are holding. I believe we were on Lamed Beis, and I believe we were by the two dots. Was it the first two dots or the second two dots?
The middle, crossed by the Tosis Meila, right around there.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, perfect. Thank you. So the Gemara says, Tanu Rabban, ha'oichel truma pachas mikazayis. So let's just refresh our memories, because this sugya today is based on a machloikis that the Gemara has just quoted between the Tanna Kama and Abba Shaul. The Tanna Kama says that the shear required to be mechuyev to pay keren v'chomish if you eat truma b'shogeg is a shear of a kazayis, because it says v'ish ki yoichel kodesh, and yoichel is achila and achila is b'kazayis. Abba Shaul says the chiyuv to pay keren v'chomish depends on whether or not the truma that you ate was a shava pruta, and we know that because it says v'nasan l'koyin, and the sina is a loshon of a shava pruta. Any sina of a pachas shava pruta. So basically, we have a machlokes Abba Shaul who says the shear is a shava pruta, and the Tanna Kama who says the shear is a kazayis. Zok the Brisa Tanu Rabban ha'oichel truma pachas mikazayis. If you eat truma and it's less than a kazayis, mishalom as a keren, ve'enim mishalom as a chomish. You pay keren, you don't pay chomish. So let's think about this for a second. This doesn't sound like Abba Shaul, because Abba Shaul doesn't use the kazayis. That's not how he evaluates when you have to pay keren v'chomish. He says it's totally in shava pruta. But we're going to soon see that we might be able to say this is going according to Abba Shaul. Let's have a look. What exactly is the case? Either less bei shava pruta. If there's no shava pruta, now the moment the Brisa says that you pay keren, you don't pay chomish, so essentially what the Brisa is saying is this doesn't follow the track of eating truma b'shogeg where you pay keren v'chomish v'osham. It falls into the category of standard gzela. So therefore you pay the keren. But frankly, Gemara either less bei shava pruta. If the amount of truma that you've taken from the kohen was not a shava pruta, well, keren amila l'shalom, because we know there is no mitzvah of hashavas gzela. There's no mitzvah to return something that's less than a shava pruta. There is bei shava pruta, and if there was a shava pruta, then chomish nami l'shalom, you should pay the chomish as well. So now it seems like we're talking about Abba Shaul because we're suggesting that even though it's less than the kazayis, but if it's worth a shava pruta, if it's worth a pruta, then you would pay the keren v'chomish. So Zok Gemara la'olam is pay shava pruta. Let's say speaking where there is a shava pruta. You might ask me, according to Abba Shaul, why don't you pay keren v'chomish? Why don't you pay keren v'chomish shava pruta? Why is it relevant that it's less than the kazayis? I feel hachi, even the less big kazayis, mishalom as a keren, veinim mishalom as a chomish. So this would indicate that you need both. You'd need both that it should be a shava pruta and that it should be a kazayis, and those two things combined is what you need in order to be mechuyev the keren v'chomish of eating someone's truma b'shogeg. Amru Rabbanan kamed Rav Papa. So the Rabbanan mentioned this in front of Rav Papa, and they said, "How do like Abba Shaul?" This would seemingly not be consistent with Abba Shaul. The Ika Abba Shaul, Amar Abba Shaul said, "Kivin sheyesh b'shava pruta, avol gav the less bekazayis." The way we understood Abba Shaul was that it's not totally in two factors; it's totally only in shava pruta, and we don't care if it's a kazayis. If it's a shava pruta and you ate truma of a kohen that was a shava pruta, no matter how small it is, you mechuyev to pay back keren v'chomish, and that has nothing to do with the shava pruta. So this brisa that says you need both seems not to be consistent with Abba Shaul. Amul Rav Papa said no. Afilu tema Abba Shaul. Let's argue that this is Abba Shaul, but Abba Shaul tartaboy. Maybe Abba Shaul holds that you don't only need a shava pruta, you need a shava pruta and you need it to be a kazayis.
Yes. Wouldn't this also not go according to Tanna Kama also?
It wouldn't go according to the Tanakama either, because they say it's exclusively totally in a shavar pruta. I'm sorry, in a kazayis. I apologize. The Tanakama says it's exclusively totally in a kazayis. That's right. So it would be so the Talmidim of Rav Papa were suggesting that this must be a third cheetah, and they discovered a third cheetah. They discovered a new planet, right? Rav Papa said, "Don't get so excited. This could be Rav Papa." Yes.
They're specifying two different aspects. One is a size and one is a value. So which one in your eyes is greater?
Me, Yosy Simon's eyes?
No, in the Gemara, obviously.
Oh.
I mean, you're the same. I mean, you're not a Tanakama, but.
I'm not even a Hu Gavra. Any person that was mentioned in the Gemara could make Chis Mason. I can't make Chis Mason.
He's a Yesh Imrim. How about that?
I'm not even that. No, I'm not even that. I'm not even a Mandamar. But let's talk about the Gemara. So well, it's all totally in Gzeres HaKosov. There's a Gzeres HaKosov that if you eat someone's truma, you pay care of a chaimish. That's a special Gzera. It's a chay, and it only applies to show you're not amazing. So the Gemara is just looking for clues in the Torah as to the parameters of that chiyuv. And they're just medayikit from the psukim that discuss it. The psukim that discuss the chiyuv of keren v'chaimish mention v'nosan and mention kiyoichal. And the Tanoim are trying to understand what are the important factors. So I don't think anybody can state an opinion on it. It's all based on Gzeres HaKosov.
I know, but when people have a machlekes, the machlekes is a shear of a kazayis or a whatever, an egg or whatever it may be. But here one is talking about value. Shava pruta is dollars and cents, and kazayis is the size. Now, depending upon the product, one like gold, kazayis of gold is worth a heck of a lot more than a pruta.
Now I understand what you're saying. Okay, very good. So we're talking about truma here, which is fruit that you're eating. So the Gemara actually assumes, and we're going to soon see in a Rashi over here, we're going to soon see in a Rashi that the Gemara assumes that a kazayis of food, a kazayis of fruit, that is, should be worth a pruta. Because later on, we're going to see in Rashi in a second, the Gemara says when we say that it could be worth a shavar pruta, even though it's less than the kazayis, Rashi suggests that it might be a year where there was a hunger. If you look at the Rashi, the ispe shavar pruta of a leka kazayis, so Rashi right away is also thinking like you're thinking, and Rashi is saying, okay, let's try to figure out if you could possibly create a relationship between size and value. And by fruit, you're right, by gold, it's totally off the charts. There's no connection. But by fruit, Rashi says there's a guess and understanding that a kazayis of fruit would be equal a pruta. And in the case where you have a less than a kazayis of food that's worth a pruta, Rashi has to justify it by saying kigoyin shnas b'tzeres. When would such a small piece of food have so much value? Only if it's a hunger year. So your comparison, and you're looking for some type of connection between the value and the size is very relevant. And I guess they're sort of synchronized when you're talking about fruit.
So what you're saying is normally in this machlokes, a kazayis is probably smaller than a pruta.
Well, it sounds like they're close.
Sounds like what?
It sounds like they're close. A kazayis of pears would roughly cost a pruta.
So if they're having machlokes, that means they hold differently. So what is the difference? That's what I'm asking you to specify.
So the difference would be, let's say you ate a kazayis of fruit, and it was not worth a shavar pruta. Let's say you need 2 kazayisim to be a shavar pruta.
So you feel that this is a smaller amount.
It's possible that you would eat a kazayis of pears and it's not a shavar pruta, and it's possible to eat a shavar pruta worth of pears and it's less than a kazayis.
So it depends on the item what you ate. Like if you ate pepper, which
it would depend on the item, but it would also depend on the market.
Right.
Right? Rashi's saying
Interesting.
it depends on the market. Because when we talk about pairs of truma, we're talking about grain. We're talking about things that would typically be given for truma. But in
Usually
there
when
might be some fruits that are particularly expensive, and less than a kazayis of them, its normal value would be a shavuot.
I think maybe the basis of the machlokus is about whether it's a value issue or whether it's a taste issue. Like if you've imbibed some pleasure enough from it.
Could be. I mean, could be. We could try to understand the Gzeres HaKosov. So if the Gzeres HaKosov says it's totally in the kazayis, so it might be a certain amount of hana you have to have. And if the Gzeres HaKosov is talking about a value, then it's a certain value. So yeah, there could be svaris to. There are svaris to why the Torah did it that way, but we're focusing on what the Torah is dictating. Okay, so let's see what the Gemara says weiter. So Zok Tehillah Gemara. So what happened is that Rav Papa wanted to say that maybe Abba Shaul holds you need both. In order to trigger the chiyuv of keren v'chaimish, you must eat both a kazayis and it has to have the value of at least a shavar pruta. Zok the Gemara. That's what Rav Papa said. So the Gemara asked on him, "Umi boy Abba Shaul tarti." Rav Papa, are you sure that you're right? That Abba Shaul would hold that it has to be both a kazayis as well as a shavar pruta? I'm going to prove to you that that's not what Abba Shaul holds. Rather, Abba Shaul holds that if it's a shavar pruta, even if it's less than a kazayis, it's still going to be chayiv, and therefore you cannot say that Abba Shaul is the Tana of the Brisa that we quoted, and then there must be a third Tana. Right.
Until something else.
Okay, you're talking about the original lashon of Abba Shaul. The original. Okay, that's very good. So the Gemara, I'm happy you made that diak because that's the type of diak the Gemara is about to make. So let's see what the Gemara says. Vatnan Abba Shaul Omer. Abba Shaul said, "Es sheyesh boy shavar pruta chayiv v'tashlumin. Es she'ein boy shavar pruta ein chayiv v'tashlumin." What is Abba Shaul talking about? Zokt Rashi, what Abba Shaul is talking about is a trumas shoygig koi, the keren v'choimish kamer. So Abba Shaul said, related to truma v'shoygig, that if it has a shavar pruta, you're chayiv. If it doesn't have a shavar pruta, you're not chayiv. So this brayse Chaim Shvi is a little bit more explicit that it's focusing only on the shavar pruta, but it gets even better. Amr Loi, the Chachamim, the Tanakama that argues on Abba Shaul, this is how they express the fact that they argue with him. And they said, Loi Amr shavar pruta, you don't find anywhere that a shavar pruta is important, Elo le'inyan me'ila bilvad, when you're discussing the Isra Me'ila. Meaning, if you're moil behektish, you had enough of hektish, there it's based on value, not on achila. Aval truma, but when we're talking about this Gzeres HaKosov of truma, that if you eat truma b'shoygig, you're mechuyev to make keren v'choimish, einoi chayiv ad sheyehei boy kazayis. You're not chayiv until there's a kazayis. Now, if Abba Shaul holds you need both, Abba Shaul would agree with that. If they want to argue on Abba Shaul, they should have said v'misa kivon sheyesh boy kazayis miboylei. What they should have told Abba Shaul is, once there's a kazayis, we don't care about the value. Then it's over. But that's not what they said. They said you need a kazayis, which would indicate that Abba Shaul holds you don't need a kazayis. A kazayis is irrelevant. All that matters is the value. So tiyufta. So Rav Papa's argument that Abba Shaul holds you would need both a kazayis and the value of a pruta, that doesn't hold water, because from the brises you clearly see, from the conversation between Abba Shaul and the Tanakama, you clearly see that Abba Shaul holds it depends exclusively on value. The shir achila is irrelevant completely. Zok the Gemara, the Rav Papa hadavei. Not only did Rav Papa's Talmidim prove him wrong, Rav Papa himself will show something that Rav Papa said also shows that he holds that Abba Shaul says that it's dependent on value only. It doesn't matter how much of it you ate. Titania, the Chata Bishkaga. It says the Chata Bishkaga. We're talking about bringing a carbon chatas. Rashi says b'meila the hektish ksiv. So when you're moil the hektish b'shoygig, the halacha is you also pay back keren v'chaimish, and you have to bring a carbon called anashama ilos. So the question is, what if someone has a noah from hektish? He's moil the hektish b'mezid. Would he bring a korban asham ilos. Zaktimar, he wouldn't. You know why? Because we have a pasuk, the chata bishkaga prat lemezid. So the reason how we know, the way that we know that you don't bring an asham ilos if you're over meila b'mezid is because of a pasuk. Frankly, Gemara, why in the world do I need a pasuk? I can so easily figure it out from a kal v'chaymer. But I didn't. Umashar mitzvahs. Madach all the other mitzvahs in the Torah where you bring a korban chatos where you're shogi. And Rashi suggests, such as if one eats dam b'shogi, or if one eats chaylev b'shogi, shechayev and kares. If you eat dam, you're chayev kares, which is a misa chamura. If you eat chaylev, you're chayev kares. It's a misa chamura. Nevertheless, poiter v'enes hamezid. Nevertheless, you do not bring a korban chatos if you were over naver b'mezid. And Rashi says the reason why you don't is because it says shkaga when the Torah talks about the chiyuv to bring a korban chatos for one of these chayiv krisos. The Torah uses the word shagig. So these are isurim chamurim because b'mezid they net the punishment of chorus. Yet even though they're so chamer, you still don't bring a korban chatos if you do it b'mezid. Meila, which is a much lower level crime, she'ein b'kares, because if one is moil b'hekesh on purpose, the einish is misa b'dei shemayim, not kares. And kares is a much more severe misa, because first of all, by kares, the person dies younger, and his children are also nichras. By misa b'dei shemayim, it's less chomer. So if meila is clearly a less severe crime than the other chiyuv chatayis, einay din shapatos hamezid, surely there should be no korban for doing the ver of meila b'mezid. So why don't I need a pasuk of a chata b'shkaga to tell me that? If you hold that the misa b'dei shemayim has come with rabbi minay, then
you would have to bring a korban.
why would you have to bring a korban?
We don't give you.
I don't know. If someone did in the ver b'mezid, he's chayiv kares, or by meila he's chayiv misa b'dei shemayim. So where does come with rabbi minay fit in?
The reason why he's not gonna,
We're discussing you bring a korban. We're discussing bring a korban.
Come with rabbi means that you can only get the.
Oh, so you want to say the kamei with the rabbi minay patters for the korban?
Yeah.
I don't know if you only find that kamei with the rabbi minay patters me from making a payment, a financial payment. I don't know anywhere where we use kamei with rabbi minay to patter somebody from bringing a korban. So Zok the Gemara, why do I need a pasuk to tell me that you don't bring the Neshama Meila on the Mezid? I know from a Kal V'chomer, if more severe crimes don't bring a korban for a Mezid, surely a lesser crime of Meila should not bring a korban for a Mezid. Zok the Gemara, what are you talking about? I can flip this around on you. I can show that Meila is a more severe crime than all the other Isurei Kares. Lo yomamrit b'shar mitzvahs shekein lo chayav b'misa. Tamer b'Meila shechayav b'misa. Misa b'dei shemayim is a more severe misa. Don't tell me that the other isurim are more chomer because they have kares. I'm gonna argue that meila is more chomer because that's misa b'dei shemayim. So clearly, at this point, the Gemara holds that misa b'dei shemayim is more severe. Maybe because they learn misa b'dei shemayim, someone dies younger. Tamad loimer b'shkaga. That's why we need a pasuk of b'shkaga to tell me prat lemezid that a mezid will not bring a korban ashamilis. I don't understand this brisa. I'm confused. Hi Tana, meikara alima leikaris. First, he made this kal v'chomer, and he thought that karis is more severe. Ulubesoif alima lamisa, and then he changes his mind. It doesn't make sense because we really know that karis is more chomer than misa. So if that's the case, I have a good kal v'chomer, and if that's the case, why do I need a pasuk to tell me that you do not bring an ashama ilash if you were moil b'mezid? Zok to Gemara, well Amar lei hachik Amar. So Rab Chia bar Avin answered as follows. This is why we're going to show you that meila is not is more chomer. This is how we're going to show meila is more chomer than other averos. Loi im amrit b'shar mitzvos. All the other yisurim, like somebody eats dam, if someone eats chaylev, there's a shir achila. Chaylev, you have to eat a kazayis to be chayiv kares. Dam, you have to drink a revius to be chayiv kares. So they're less chomer because they require a shir in order to be over. Tomer b'meila shechayiv b'misa b'pachas b'kazayis. by the Isser Meila, you'll be mechuyev, even if it's less than kazayis, as long as it's a shava pruta. So since Meila is more chomer, you might also say that you bring in the shama Meila even by a mazid. That's why we need a pasuk by Meila of the chota b'shkaga that you only bring an ashama Meila if you were moil b'shay. And after this wonderful explanation that Reb Chia bar Avin offered up to show an angle where Meila is more chomer than the other Yisurim, he said, Tanuach daitach shenachlas daiti. You should be gebenched, Reb Avin, because Reb Nachman told me you should be gebenched. Reb Nachman told Reb Chia bar Avin, you should be gebenched because you calmed me down. You tell me a beautiful pshat. A beautiful pshat. You opened my eyes that in one aspect, Meila is more chomer than other Yisurim Shabbatayah, because Meila you're chayiv even on less than the kazayis. So they told him back, Reb Chia told him back,
Show us that a kazayis is less than
it depends on, like David Leibman said, it depends on what product you're talking about, right? What type of teretz? You're so happy with this teretz? This is not a good teretz at all. This is not a good teretz at all. This teretz that you're chayiv on Meila, but pachas mikazayis is not a good teretz. The Rabbi Rab Sheish is shover naga. Rabbi Rab Sheish slugged up this teretz that it's not a teretz anymore. So you shouldn't be so relaxed. Well, how did Rabbi Rab Sheish slug up this teretz? Because they asked the following question: Man shamas lei the Omar hazid b'meila b'misa. Now this whole thing is based on that there's a chiyuv of misa b'dei shemayim if you are moil b'mezid. Who holds that? Because that's not a liba d'chula alma. There are people who hold that if you're moil b'mezid, it's not a chiyuv misa. So who is the Tana that we must be talking about who holds that there is a chiyuv misa b'dei shemayim by meila? It's Rebbe. The Tanya hazid b'meila. If someone was moil b'mezid, Rebbe omer b'misa, the Chachamim omer b'azara. The Chachamim say it's just a lav. So clearly from our brisa, they hold that there's a chiyuv misa if you did meila b'mezid. So clearly our brisa must be following the sheet of Rebbe. My time with the Rebbe. And where did Rebbe get this from? How does Rebbe know that there's a chiyuv of misa b'dei shemayim if one does meila b'mezid? Amar abavo gomer chet mitruma. We learn a gzeres shava, the word chet that it says by meila, from the word chet that it says by truma. Ma truma b'misa. Just like truma, if one eats truma b'mezid, if a zar eats truma b'mezid, it says u'meisu boy ki yechalaluhu. So there's a chiyuv misa b'dei shemayim for one who eats truma b'mezid. Af meila, where it says a lashon of chet by meila, we learn b'misa it has the same halacha as truma, that there's a chiyuv misa b'dei shemayim. So the about the whole nekor of misa b'dei shemayim by meila comes from truma, but now there's a link between truma and meila which we have to exploit further. Umina, there's going to be more that we can import from truma. Ma truma b'kazayis, just like truma, you're not going to have the chiyuvim of eating truma unless you ate a kazayis of truma. Af meila b'kazayis, so too the meila has to be b'kazayis. So we've just slugged up. You wanted a time before that meila is more chomer than chaylev in a certain aspect, because you'll be mechuyev in meila with a shava pruta, even though it's less than the kazayis. But this particular Tana, who you're trying to explain, the Tana of this brisa, who told us quite clearly that he holds that by meila there's a chiv misa, but the fact that he said that, it shows that he holds that there's a direct link from meila to truma. Once you create a direct link from meila to truma, by definition, you also have to hold that there'll be no isra meila if it's less than a kazayis. So we're back to square one. Where do you find meila is more chomer than other yisurim? You can't argue it's because meila is even pachas b'kazayis, because if you hold there's a chiv misa by meila, by definition, you also have to hold that the minimum share for meila is b'kazayis. Umatzkaf Rav Papa, and Rav Papa wanted to ask a kasha on their upflow, and he asked as follows: Mimai de Rebbe krabonisfirle. How do you know that Rebbe learns that by truma it has to be kazayis, which is what the Rabbanan of Abba Shaul said? Dilma Abba Shaul sfirle. Maybe Rav Papa himself raised the issue that maybe Rebbe of our brisa here holds like Abba Shaul that even by truma it's totally in the shear of Shavapruta and not totally in the shear of a kazayis. The Amar Yesh B'Shavar Pruta Abagav Lesba Kazayis. So Rav Papa himself suggested over here that Abba Shaul holds you don't need a Kazayis for Truma. It's only totally in Shavar Pruta. We just quoted from Rav Papa who the Amar the Abba Shaul Tarti boy. Didn't Abba Shaul just say on Ahmed Beis that didn't Rav Papa just say that according to Abba Shaul you need both a Shavar Pruta and the Kazayis? Here, clearly, Rav Papa is showing that the way he understands Abba Shaul, that you only need a Shavar Pruta, you don't need a Kazayis. You see from here that Rav Papa retracted his opinion in how to understand Abba Shaul, and he no longer holds that Abba Shaul holds you need both. He clearly holds, according to Abba Shaul, all you need is a Shavar Pruta to be mechuyev all of the Yisurim, whether it's Keren V'Chaimish or Misa, all you need is a Shavar Pruta by Truma. Okay, now we're going to go back to our brisa. So we have a problem. We have a brisa that says that you need a pasuk by Meila to teach you that b'mezid you don't bring a masham milos. And the Gemara asked, the brisa says, why do we do the pasuk? We have a kavachomer, madich chelev, which is more chomer. There's a chi of chorus on it. Nevertheless, you don't bring a carbon for a mezid. Surely Meila, which is a less severe avera, because you only have misa b'nei shemayim. Surely by Meila you should not bring a carbon for a mezid. So why do I need the pasuk of Bishgaga to teach us that by Meila you don't bring a carbon on a mezid? So Mar Barei Ravana wanted to suggest another angle as to how we can say that Meila is more chomer than the other Isurim. Amar Hachi Kamer, Loyim Amrit Bishar Mitzvahs, by all other mitzvahs in the Torah, Shaloi also behen she'ein mischaven kimischaven. You're not over the avera if you're ein mischaven. For instance, on Shabbos, shem nischaven lachtoch es a tolosh, v'chotach es a mechuber. Let's say you had there was tvu that was tolosh, and you intended to cut the tolosh. There's no isser in slicing vegetables on Shabbos. There's no isser in cutting any type of thing that grows, provided that it's already cut off. So once it's already not connected to the ground, you're allowed to cut it further. So you had a stalk of wheat, and it was not connected to the ground, and you wanted to slice it further. And by mistake, not realizing it, the wheat that you slashed was wheat that was actually still connected to the ground. So over there, the lacha is shapater, because you were not nischaven to cut the mechuber. Let's say there were two piles of wool, and you wanted to snuggle up in a pile of wool that was chulin, and by mistake, when nischamem begize oila shemal. So even though you had no intention of having hana from hektish, you're still going to be moil, which is a chumr b'meila, because by other yisurim, if you did something without an intention, in fact, you would be putter. So therefore, since we now have an angle as to where meila is more severe than the other isurim, we also need a special pasuk to tell us that by meila b'mezid you don't need to bring a carbon. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak had a different variation of the same thing that Mar Barei Ravana just said, and he said as follows: Amar Hachi Kamar, Loy im amrit b'shar mitzvahs shekein loy mischayev behen she'ein misasek kimisasek. By other mitzvahs, you're not mechuyev. You're not mechuyev when it's misasek like you would be mechuyev if it's ein misasek. So he says something similar to what we said before, but he doesn't say before. He said shem nischaven lachtoch esatolosh v'chotach esamechuber. Here it says shem nischaven lahagbia esatolosh v'chotach amechuber shapater. And where Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak argues on Ravana is as follows: on Shabbos there's standing wheat and there's wheat that was already cut from the ground. I was planning to cut the standing wheat. I apologize. I was planning to cut the already cut wheat, and by mistake, I slashed and I cut the mechuber. So that's called Einim Eschaven, which is what Mar Barei Ravana said would be potter on Shabbos. Dr. Nachman bar Yitzchak, I disagree with you. If you had in mind to cut wheat that was already cut down, and then by mistake you cut wheat that was mechuber, that would also be chayiv. The only time you're not chayiv is if you had no intention of cutting at all. You wanted to pick up a stalk of wheat that you thought was already tolish. You wanted to pick it up, and by mistake you cut a mechuber. So what it's saying is, it's not that I just had kavanah to do the malacha on something else. I didn't even want to cut it all. I wasn't involved in cutting it all. I was makavan in lifting up, and then by mistake, what I lifted up was something that was connected to the ground, and it ended up tearing out of the ground. That's where you'll say misasek is potter. So therefore, other isurim shem neschavin like bias a tolish. If you only wanted to pick up tolish, you didn't want to cut anything. But the chadach has a mechober, and you end up doing a malacha. Chapater. Everybody agrees there it's potter. Tamer bit meila, which is more chomer. Shem hoshit yodei lechli lidel chaypetz. What happens if you were just stretching your hand out because you wanted to pick something up, you wanted to grab something, and your hand brushed by some oil? So it's completely inadvertent. If you have hana from hektish, even though it's completely inadvertent, you're still moil. So you see there's a chumrah by meila. So therefore, we need a special pasuk by meila to tell you that you do not bring an hasham meila for amazing. Beautiful. So now we've finished explaining the brisa that really was taking us off on a tangent. The whole purpose of bringing the brisa, this whole thing started because we were analyzing Abishol. Does Abishol say it's only dependent upon Shava Pruta, or you also need a Kazayis? Rav Papa at one point said, according to Abishol, you need both. We proved that wrong, and we proved that Rav Papa himself also believes that it's wrong. So at the end of the day, Abishol holds you only need a Shava Pruta. You do not need an Achila. So it's really a three-way machlokes. We have Abishol who holds it's totally in a Shava Pruta only. We have the Tanakam who holds it's totally in a Kazayis. And we had that third brisa that the Talmidim of Rav Papa brought down that seems to say you need both a Kazayis and a Shava Pruta. Okay, beautiful. So now, and we also, as an aside, we also got shot in the brisa that explains why an Ashama Elois is only brought to the Shayim, not in the Mezid, because of the Chat Mishkaga, and you could not have learned it out of the other Yisurim, because Meila has something that's more chomer about it, and the Maskana of our Sugi is that what's more chomer about it is that it's chayiv, even if you were moil completely inadvertently.
By the way, I now,
Right.
this Abishol is so worried about what he says.
Right.
So Wikipedia says Abishol was a Tana of the latter period of the second temple of Yerushalayim, approximately 2 generations before the temple destruction, and he used to take questions from the Jewish public and answer on matters of halacha while working in his grocery store.
So he's such a Clarkite.
But he was in his grocery store.
Abishol was a grocer. Okay, gewaltig. You know, not only did Abishol make it to Wikipedia, he also made it to the Mishnah.
Oh wow! No, I wanted to bring out the
understand.
store, and he's still about
But look, learn. Yeah. So he knew the value. He was able to know the value of Paris. And oh, very good. You see, Chaim Tzvi wants to tell you that Abishol was a grocer, so he understood the sheer kazayis and the price associated with it because he sold it. So now we're going to go back to a blurb that we heard a blot ago, around exactly on this position, that if you're mafresh chametz, if you're mafresh truma that's chametz, it's not good. So if you have tevel that's chametz on Pesach, and you're mafresh truma from it, the truma will not be a good truma. And we learned it out from Vanos and Loi, you have to give it to the kohen. So the Gemara here is going to go back to that halacha, and the Gemara is going to provide some explanation. Amar Mar. Actually, on Lamed Beis Amud Aleph, the Gemara just said it will not become truma, but the Gemara doesn't explain why, and now we're going to explain why. Amar Mar. When do you say that you could be mafresh truma and it'll work on Pesach? Is b'mafresh truma v'chmitza. If you were mafresh the truma from grain that was tevel, but it was not chametz yet. Aval hivritz chametz truma, but if it was already chametz and then you were mafresh it, divra koil eina kadosha, it will not be chal. So you cannot be mafresh truma from chametz on Pesach. Minan mili. How do you know this? Now, even according to Rabbi Yosy Glili, that you're allowed to have hana from chametz on Pesach, even according to Rabbi Yosy Glili, we're going to learn that this would not work. You cannot be mafresh truma of chametz on Pesach. How do you know that? Amar Nachman Yitzchak Amar Krab Titein loy v'loy la'oyroi, because it says by truma reishes the gantcha tiroishcha v'yitzarecha v'reishes geseincha titen loy, give it to him, mean to have the coin should be able to have the full benefit of it, not only that he should have to burn it. So if you're giving him truma of chametz, the only thing he'll be able to do with it is burn it. That's not called a titen loy. And from there we learn that you cannot be mafresh truma if he's just going to have to burn it. Frank the Gemara, I'll prove to you that you are allowed to be mafresh truma, even though all the coin can do with it is burn it. You're not allowed to take truma from tamei to Torah. So you have a pile of tevel that's tahar. You have a pile of tevel that's tamei. So you want to be mafresh truma from the tevel that's tamei to be misakin your truma, your tevel that's tahar. So you're not supposed to do that. But in term b'shoigig, but if you did it b'shoigig, then truma say truma. Now here, this truma that you're making is tamei. So what is the kohen going to have to do with it? The only thing he'll be able to do with it is burn it. So why is it a good truma? The same svar that you're using to tell me why you cannot be mafresh truma of chametz, by the same token, you should not be able to be mafresh truma of tuma, because it's going to go la'ayrai, and that's not called in Messina l'koyin. Dr. Loy Kasha, and this teretz is going to really open our eyes up. When do you say that with the evidence works if you made the truma b'shoyig even though it was tamei? That's because that had a shasha kosher. There was a time where this tevel was not tamei. So since there was a time where it wasn't tamei, that you'll be able to give truma from. But hacha here, the chametz that we're talking about is in a case where it didn't have a shasha kosher. What is the case that we're talking about? How do you have no shasha kosher? We know for sure this wasn't chametz. It didn't grow as chametz, so it must have had a shasha kosher. It must have been non-chametz at one time. But kegoyin the achmetz b'mechuber, we know that the chiyuv of truma, the wheat does not become tevel until it's cut down and processed. And it's speaking here where even before you cut it down, even before a chiyuv truma was triggered, it became chametz already. And that's why there's no shasha kosher. Aval achmetz betolish, if it became chametz after it was tolish, hachanami de kacha, in fact, it would be a good truma. So if you have tevel that became chametz after it was cut down on Pesach, you're allowed to use it to be mafresh truma and give it to the kohen.
Wouldn't we say that's that's like most cases are like that?
Most cases are like what?
I'm saying that it doesn't get chametz on before cut.
Oh, that's what I want to get into in a second. Thank you for bringing that up. That's exactly what I want to get into. But I'll call them, the Gemara is discussing here. Are you telling me that if it first became chametz after it was tolish, in fact, the truma would work? As a matter of fact, that's 100% true. The Gzeres Irin Piskama of a Mamar condition She'ilta. This is quoting from a pasuk in the Nil that says, "I asked the Malachim," and what he meant was he's quoting from a pasuk, but he just means to use it as a flowery speech. That I asked the Talmid Chacham and the Gedolim, and everybody seems to agree that it would work if you took truma if you took tevel that was chametz, and you were mafresh truma with it, it will work. And everybody passes like that. So Mechi asked a beautiful kasha. Every time we open up our $30 a pound box of matzah, it says Shmura Mishas Ketzira, right? Shmura Mishas Ketzira. But we just learned in our Gemara, it's possible that it became chametz before the Ketzira. Because how does the Gemara say the case of when there was no shas kosher? The Gemara is talking about a case where it became chametz before it was cut down. Well, how we spent $30 a pound on matzah and there might be chametz because it's only shmura mishas ksira, and our Gemara says it could become chametz even before. I want my money back. Well, that's mishas ksira is way before it becomes flour. Mishas ksira means as soon as they're cutting it, by the cutting, the meshkichim are there when they cut it, so it shouldn't become chametz. Our Gemara says it could have become chametz even before the ksira, which means while it's growing, which means you need meshkichim standing there in the farm the whole time like scarecrows to make sure that nothing got wet.
Nothing got wet. How's the
Oh, good kasha. How's it going to grow? Oh, so what are we going to do here? So we learn from here that the only time grain can become chametz, even though it's still mechuber, is once it's fully ripened, and therefore all of our wheat that we cut down for our matzahs they cut it before it's fully ripened. And this halacha saved the lives of hundreds of Eden. Does anybody know how this halacha saved the lives of hundreds of Eden a couple of years ago? Because a couple of years ago, there was a terror tunnel. There was a terror tunnel that was dug and it came up in a wheat field. And the terrorists, the Hezbollah terrorists, were planning to infiltrate. No, I'm sorry, it's not Hezbollah. This was at south. This was Gaza. I believe it was a Gaza tunnel. I don't think it was up north. I'm not sure if it was up north or it was down south. I think it was down south. There was a terror tunnel, and the terror tunnel came up in a wheat field, and they were planning a massive terror attack before Pesach or before Purim, and they knew they had cover. When they would come out of the tunnel, they would be invisible, they would be in high stalks of wheat. And what happened was they came out of the tunnel, and everything was cut. Why? Because that field was used for matzah, and they cut the field before it was fully ripened. They had assumed that the terrorists assumed that this wheat would not be cut yet because it wasn't ripened yet. But they didn't chap that this wheat field was being used for matzah, and they came in and they had to cut it before it was ripened. And they come up and they're fully exposed, and they were taken out in a half a second. So this halacha that we're learning today, that once wheat is fully grown, it could become chametz. That halacha saved the lives of hundreds of Eden because it foiled the terrorist attack. Isn't that fascinating? Okay, so let's go weiter. So Mechitz Koicha bring that up. And sometimes I would have brought it up anyway, but it's geschmacker. Oh, you brought it up. Boom, it worked out beautifully. So Ki'asar Rav Huna B'Rei Rav Yeshua. Rav Huna B'Rei Rav Yeshua came. Also, he said as follows. Omar Krau, the pasuk says, how do we know that you cannot be mafresh truma of chametz? So a moment ago we had one pshat of tit and loy v'loy loy, right? But Rav Huna B'Rei Rav Yeshua wants another pshat, and he says it says rashis. Truma is called rashis to gancha. So we learn from there that sheshiyarel nikarin liyisrael. It needs to be that when you're mafresh truma, it creates a heter on the chulin. So when you're mafresh truma, it's mater the tevel, and it makes the tevel into chulin that will now be mutter for Yisrael to use. Yotzazu she'ein shiyar in the karen. If you're mafresh truma of chametz, even if you hold like a Yosy glili, that you're allowed to have hana from it, then your hafrashas truma hasn't accomplished anything. Because while this grain was tevel, it was osher b'achiva, but it was mutter b'hana. You're allowed to have hana from tevel. Now that you were mafresh the truma on Pesach and it was chametz, it's still mutter b'hana like a Yosy glili and osher b'achiva. So it hasn't accomplished anything. So since it hasn't accomplished anything, therefore it won't be a good truma. And on here, Rabbi Kiva Eger asks a bomb kasha, because we're not saying this limud of Rabbi Huna B'Rei Rav Yeshua is not telling me anything about that the truma is chametz. The problem is it's not going to have the proper impact on the chulin. The chulin will not become mutter b'hana. So, Frank Rabbi Kiva Eger, what happens if I have truma of chametz, but the tevel is chulin? So I have two piles. I have a pile of tevel that's not chametz, and I have a pile of tevel that is chametz, and I make the tevel that's chametz into truma to be misakin the pile of tevel that's not chametz. There, it's very much the year in the current. The truma is going to be chametz, and therefore it's going to be usher. But the chulin that I was misakin is non-chametz, and that could be eaten even on Pesach. So, Frek Rabbi Kiva Eger, from the way Rabbi Huna B'Rei Rav Yeshua is learning this limud, it's very schwer, because technically you can have truma that's chametz as long as the chulin that you're being misakin is not chametz, or vice versa. If the truma was chametz, if the chulin was chametz and the truma wasn't chametz, it wouldn't be shiur in the current, even though the truma is chulin. So even if the truma was non-chametz, if you're being mavrish truma from non-chametz on chametz, you still won't have shiur in the current, even though the truma is not chametz. So that's what Kiva Eger's kasha. It's a beautiful kasha. And he's up to the Gemara back there. Yosef of Ada bar Avia kamed Reb Chisda. Rav Acha bar Avia was sitting in front of Reb Chisda. Yosef v'Omar mishmeid Reb Yochanan. And he said something over in the name of Reb Yochanan. Anovim shenitnu. If you have grapes and the grapes became tamei, but you don't want the wine that you're going to extract from this grape to become tamei, you want to be able to use them in the Beis HaMikdash for nesachim. So how could you extract wine out of grapes that are tamei and the wine should be tahor? This is a good question to ask. You have grapes that are tamei. How do you get the wine out of these grapes and the wine should be tahor? So zokt I'll tell you what to do. Dorchan pachas mikabetza. Now the halacha is tumas oichlin, according to everybody, will not be metame something else unless you have a kabeya. So if I have less than the kabeya of food that's tame, assuming it could become tame to machlek, it could become tame. But let's say I have less than the kabeya of food that's tame. If it touches something else, it will not make it tame. Everybody agrees that tumas oichlin does not transmit unless it's a sheer kabeya. So if I take grapes, but there's less than the kabeya of grapes, now even though these grapes are tame, they will not be able to be metame the wine that comes out of them. So if I squeeze them and wine comes out, yeah, the wine are touching the grapes and the grapes are tame, but the grapes cannot transmit tumah to the wine because you took less than the kabetza. That's a very good question, and we're going to get to that in a second. Anavim shenitmu dorchen pachas mikabetza v'yenin kosher l'nesachim, and the wine will not be tummy. Fregt Chaim Tzvi, I don't understand. The wine came out of the grapes, so when the grapes were tummy, don't you automatically say that the wine inside them, which were part of them, should also be tummy? Right? That's Chaim Tzvi's kasha. Zok the Gemara, Alma, you see from here that kasavar mashkin mifkid pekidi. You see from here that Reb Achabar Reb Avia held that the juice in a grape, the juice in a fruit, is not considered part of the fruit. You look at the fruit as merely a jar, and it has inside it juice, but it's not part of the fruit. So therefore, even though the fruit is tummy, the juice when it comes out will not be tummy. The juice when it comes out will not be tummy. You might ask, it's so good, so good. It's like juice in the jar. But if the jar is tummy, let it be metame the juice.
Now we don't say today. That's less than a kabeh.
Oh, it's less than a kabeh, right? And even if it was more than a kabeh, it's not juice yet anyway. It's not juice, but that's good.
Yosy.
Yes.
So if it's separate, then don't we have also the rule that mashkin tama b'mikdash, or that's only inside the base of mikdash?
Mashkin could be metame, but the mashkin has to become tummy first.
Because we learned that
the mashkin was tummy, it will be metame. How did it become tummy?
Right, I'm saying, but in the base of mikdash, we said there was no mashkin tama. Is that only inside the base of mikdash?
Yeah, that's only inside.
Okay.
So Zok Gemara, la'emos ka metami. When does it become tummy? L'chisachet when you kvetch them out. L'chisachet l'hu lasa l'shiurei. When you kvetch the wine out of the grape, I don't have a shear of a kabeya of the grape, and therefore the kabeya will not be a problem. So we have to stop it. But let me just learn the next kasha. Why do you need to have less than a kabetza? If you have exactly a kabetza, the moment you squeeze and some juice comes out, the grape now is less than a kabetza. So why does it be less than a kabetza? Let it be exactly a kabetza. So now we learned tamei meis shesachat zeisem v'anovim. If a tamei meis was squeezing out zeisem v'anovim, kabetza mechuvenes. If it was exactly a kabetza, tahirin, it would be tahar. So why over here do we limit it to less than a kabetza? So the Gemara hasam di'eber hachalachatchila. If we let you use lechatchila exactly a kabetza, then you might do a drop more, and then you'll have a problem. So we're trying to make it safe and say go use a little bit less than a kabetza. The brisa that you're quoting from is the Yevid. If someone had a grape that was exactly a kabetza and squeezed it, avada won't be tummy. So lechatchila, when we're telling you how to do the process, will avada tell you to use a little bit less just to be perfectly safe. I guess we better stop here.
Square.
Your attention and everybody.
Oh, yeah.